Hey, what's up, everyone, and happy Tuesday. It's a special Tuesday edition of Ask Mike with our senior analyst. Right, we had the baseball.
We had the extra regional game, so we had to push it back a day.
And you know what? They won, so we'll allow it.
Yep, we will.
All right, so we'll just get to our first question for you, Mike. Mousetown says, I just heard about the passing of John McDonnell. What do you remember about him, and how does he compare with the other great coaches at Arkansas?
Well, forget about, first of all, what I think about how he compared. Let's go to Nolan Richardson, because probably maybe a little more than an hour ago, you and I were at his Richardson Ranch, and we talked to Nolan quite a bit about John McDonnell. Their offices were next to each other at Bud Walton Arena, but before that, they were both in Barnhill. And Nolan said, first of all, John's the best coach ever anywhere.
Yeah.
And that jives with something that I knew from a long time ago. I used to, in the summers, when it was dead and there wasn't much going on, I'd go over and talk to John because he wasn't busy. And one of the things I remember asking him one day, as I said, do you ever have other coaches on campus come and ask you what your secret is? And he said, well, just one, Nolan.
Yep.
And so today Nolan explained that, and he said that he grew up in El Paso, and at the time, UTEP, Texas El Paso, where he went to school, had an incredible track program, one of the best ever. They won, their coach there at that time won 3 Triple Crowns. That's winning cross country, indoor and outdoor track in the same year, and they did it 3 times. And he said, by the time I got to Arkansas, John's programs had just totally kicked UTEP out of the national, and now they were doing that. And so Nolan said, I wanted to meet this guy. I wanted to find out what's going on. And he said, because we were in the same building together, Barnhill, I spent a lot of time, and he said, then he just continued to win all these championships, and I was struggling a little bit trying to get my program started. And he said, I would go down and just talk to him, because he said, with all of those national championships, I wanted some kind of vibe. I thought maybe it would rub off on me, you know? So he said that they talked about a lot of things, you know, how to handle your staff, how to hire a staff, how you deal with athletes, upperclassmen versus rookies. And they talk about this stuff all the time. And he said, I got a lot of really good ideas from him. Yeah. And he said, I am convinced, and this is really significant, he said, I am convinced that John McDonnell could take any sport on this campus and win a national championship.
Really,
because what he would do is hire assistant coaches to do the X's and O's. And he would do the rest of it. And he said he just had that ability to figure out how to win in a sport. And how you won in track and field was you had to get a lot of points from different guys in different events. Yeah. And what John would do is he would sit down before every meet, whether it was a conference meet or a national meet or regional, whatever, and he would figure out, comparing Arkansas to the other people and who had qualified from other teams, he'd say, okay, this guy's going to do this, so our guy has to do that. And sometimes it would be, he would do it in terms of points. There might be a guy that was capable of getting 6 points in the 800 meters and 4 points in the 1600 meters or 1500 meters. So he would add all that up, and he would say, you need to have
4 points, 8 points.
8 points or whatever. And he would just go point by point over this stuff, and to the point where he got to where these guys knew he meant business. He was serious about what he expected to do. Now, this is a story I would add on my own. They at one point won 12 straight national indoor championships. It's an incredible string. Well, they'd won about 6 in a row. And I'd gotten used to them winning every year, so I go over to talk to John one day. They're about to leave to go to this meet. And I said, well, you're going to win another one, right? And he said, no, we're not going to win this one. I go, what? He said, I just don't have the guys. He said, I've looked at all the points, who's capable of what, and I just don't see any way we can win this thing. We're probably going to finish 3rd. So I'm like, wow. And so then they go and they win it. And he comes back, and I think this guy's just feeding me a line. So I ran into one of the guys, I've long since forgotten who, one of the guys on the track team, and I said, what? You guys weren't supposed to win. What happened? He said, I'll tell you what happened. He got in the locker room with us where he was giving us the points. And he said, it was different this time. He said, look, guys, I'm not going to go over that anymore. Because he said, we just don't have the horses this time. We can't win this. You can't do it. I'm very happy with what each of you have done.
Mm-hmm.
You've done as well as you can possibly do, so just go out there and do that, and we'll finish third or fourth or whatever we do. As long as I think you guys have done everything you could do, I'm okay with not winning it. And then he left.
Yep.
And he said when he left, the guys in that room who'd been a part of those other championship teams and now they're the seniors, they're going, wait a minute. We're not going to be the ones to break the streak.
Right.
That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
We got to figure out a way to do it. So he said, we did the point thing.
Yep.
We went over it and we started telling these guys, you've got to John's got you down here for 4 points or 6. You've got to get 8 points.
Yeah.
You have to do this. You have to score in 2 events. And he said, we had this one guy, we didn't think he could score a point. He was in 2 events. We thought he would not even make the finals in either event. And he scored in both. He said, everybody overachieved. And he said,
yep.
We did that because John made us think that he thought we weren't good enough,
exactly.
which then motivated us. So John had a lot of little tricks up his sleeve for winning these things. He could be incredibly tough. He could be incredibly just warm and open to these guys. One of the things that he did was, unless you gave him a reason to think otherwise, he said, I'm treating these guys like men.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he did was he let his upperclassmen be leaders in the locker room. He said, they're around the younger guys a lot more than I am. They see things I don't see.
Yep.
They see a guy that came in drunk from the night before and hung over. They see a guy that didn't really work out after the workout. He just kind of went home as soon as it was over. And he said, so I let them be the leaders. And he said, one day one of them came to me, I've long since forgotten who, and he said, he was talking about a hot shot freshman they had, and he said, nah, he's not cutting it. You need to talk to him, coach, because he's not going to get the kind of points we need out of him this year. And John said, no, you go talk to him. And he's like, why us? And he said, because if you're convinced that he can't do what I brought him in here to do, you come back and tell me, and I'll tell him to hit the road.
Yeah.
We'll get rid of him. And he said, the guy went back and he told the other seniors, wait a minute, John's putting this in our laps. We're the one that decides whether he goes or stays. We better work with him some more and see if we can make that happen.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what they did. They went back to this guy, they started working with him, and it turned out he ended up being a very good freshman and then went on and been one of the leaders when he was a senior. That's just another example of the way John coached.
Yeah.
He was absolutely incredible. I'm very happy that he was smart. He retired when he was 70. He'd been here for 30 years because he said he wanted to spend the last years of his life with his family because he'd spent so much time away from them.
Yeah.
He had a cattle ranch over in eastern Oklahoma, not too far across the state line. I think Nolan told me he had about 1,000 head the last time he went over there. It was a huge operation. And most people are familiar with Nolan's Ranch. They call it Nolan's Ranch. You were just out there. It's close to Fayetteville, but you'd swear you're a million miles into nowhere.
Oh, absolutely. You got to go down a long dirt road back there.
And he credited John McDonald. John talked so much about having land, and Nolan at that time was living on a golf course. Nolan went and asked John about it. Then Nolan, one of his own ex-athletes, Mike Connolly Sr., was into real estate at that time, and he ended up buying part of the land that Mike Connolly had and then bought the rest of it after Connolly moved back to Indiana. So that's how he ended up with the Richardson Ranch, and it all started with John McDonald. So John was able to spend time with his family those last 10 or 12 years after he retired, and I'm glad for that because they're really good people, Ellen and all of them. His wife, his 2 kids, which were little toddlers when I first remembered them, and now they're all grown. It's a great story. He was a great coach at Arkansas.
And by the way, if anyone wants to hear from Nolan in the interview that you did with him, it is up on our website as well. But Razorback Redneck wants to know, Mike, have you ever seen anything like what Kevin Kopps did in the Fayetteville Baseball Regional? Somebody told me he pitched more than 150 innings over the weekend. That doesn't sound right. That sounds nuts. How does he do that without tearing up his arm?
He actually went 185 pitches, so it was over 150. Pitches, and it was just incredible. The thing about it is they didn't score on him. All that pitching he did in 3 different games over the weekend, he came out with 2 wins and a save. In a 1 regional, he did that.
That's crazy.
And even for me and the rest of us who are used to seeing him do these nutty things, this was even more nutty. I mean, I just didn't think he could go the whole seven innings that he went in that. And there's no way they win if he doesn't do that.
Agreed.
So how does he do all that without tearing up his arm? Well, you remember he walked by us last night with his parents, and I was joking, and I said, you know, if they cut open your arm right now, there would be little steel beams in there with gears
like
and
a
motors.
bionic arm.
Yeah, and motors and things. But then he talked to Jason a little bit later on, and he's still pushing that beet juice stuff. You know, he drinks beet juice. Okay, maybe that helps.
Hey.
I think he eats pre-prepared packaged meals from Whole Foods, so he eats healthy. All of that, I'm sure, is important, but I think the main, and I have trouble pronouncing this, it's
The cryotherapy.
Cryotherapy, and you get a cryogenic tank.
Chamber that you
And what they do is, in his case, they would put his arm in there, and it subjects his arm to temperatures from -100 to -160 degrees. And what that ends up doing, when you overuse a part of your body, like in this case his arm, you're going to get bleeding at the cellular level. It's not like your blood vessels are bursting or anything, but the little tiny vessels that go to each cell, however that works. I'm not a doctor. There's where you get the inflammation. That's where you get the pain, because you get this bleeding. Well, that freezes that area, stops the, it's the same thing when you turn your ankle and they put cold on it first to stop the bleeding. Well, that does this at the cellular level. It also apparently affects the way your nerves react to all that
stress that you're putting on it.
Put that arm under. It kind of goes to your head and says, hey, it's okay.
Right.
And then you bounce back quicker. And so, but you can see between games, if he's doing that, this would enable him to pitch. So he's very scientific. He's very scientific, but I still like to say it's just guts.
I agree.
He just got more guts than anybody else.
Well, it's like, I think he said after the game that, the more he pitched, the better he felt. Which, I mean, it's just after how many pitches he had thrown is really impressive.
I just think he's such a team guy that he just outguts everybody.
They just announced he's a semifinalist for the Golden Spikes Award, too.
It should already be. They should just say, well, we're going to
give it to Kevin Kopps.
Especially after Monday night. Come on.
Right.
You can't give that to anybody else.
All right, our next question is from Pork Soda, who wants to know, how would you compare this baseball team to the 2018 team that got to the College World Series finals?
That 2018 team had a better team batting average.
Yeah.
They had a better ERA, and they had 3 established weekend starting pitchers. This team has none of that stuff.
I feel like they're just polar opposite teams, in my opinion.
They're sort of the opposite of each other. But on the other hand, that 2018 team was 48-21. This team right now is 49-11.
Yeah.
So
That's
there's no
crazy
way
to
they're
think about.
going to even come close to the number of losses that team had. And then that team, the best they achieved in the regular season is they tied for the SEC West title.
Yeah.
This team won the SEC West by 2 games. It won the overall title. No, it won by 2.5 games. It won the overall title by 2 games. And they won the SEC tournament, which no Arkansas team had done before. Obviously, then the 2018 team didn't do that. So they have all of those things that team didn't do.
Yeah.
Now, the one thing that team did was, first of all, they got to the College World Series, and then they came within catching one fly ball of winning a national championship. So if you measure this team to that team in those terms, then the only way this team comes out ahead is they're going to have to win the national championship. You can't come any closer to winning it than that team did.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a debate if they don't win the national championship about which team was better.
Yeah.
And I can't answer that question. There's just so many ways you can debate it.
Right, because you could think about the pitching staff, you could think about just the lineup in general. I feel like the 2018 lineup, you had three guys really that you knew were going to step up every time.
Yeah, but you didn't have Kevin Kopps.
Agreed.
You didn't have somebody do
Changes.
that. You didn't have some. They've got, 5 guys now with double-digit home runs? 5?
Yeah.
That's 5 of your 9 guys. And then they didn't have a pinch hitter like Charlie Welch.
Yeah,
because if Welch had been starting, he might have double-digit home runs too.
Yeah.
And so he comes, they're sitting there, I'm telling you, I thought they'd lost. I didn't think there was any way, even when they tied it up.
You weren't the only one.
I thought Kevin can't keep pitching.
Yeah.
So sooner or later, somebody else is going to come in. Arkansas is not scoring enough runs, and they're going to lose this game. And then what happens? Charlie Welch comes up with 2 men on and hits a home run.
Yeah.
This team has ways of winning that the others, you just look at other teams and go, they just don't have that magic.
Exactly. Magic, that's a good word for it. All right. Our next question is from Pig's Feet, who wants to know, maybe it has happened before and I don't remember, but has Arkansas football ever offered an 8th grader before? And is this a trend?
Yeah, so I got to go talk to Otis about that thing.
Yeah.
He's the recruiting guru expert for us. I don't do recruiting. And so Otis says this is real. This kid's name is Lance Jackson. He's an 8th grader out of Texas. He's 6'5", 240 pounds right now, defensive end in the 8th. That's why they offer.
No kidding.
In the 8th grade, 6'5", 240 pound defensive end. So you can see why they've offered it.
Okay.
Now, have they ever offered anybody in the 8th grade before? Otis goes back a long way. So I don't ever remember it happening in football.
Man.
So it's probably a first. I don't know about a trend, but when somebody's that good, you probably start thinking, well, we got to do this. Now, years ago, when Stan Heath was the head basketball coach here, there was a kid, I think he was Fayetteville Junior, or in one of the junior highs, I can't remember which one here in town. His name was Fred Gully. And there was a story that was printed, I think, in the Springdale newspaper. It doesn't exist anymore, but they had Fayetteville and Springdale papers in those days. And the story said that Stan Heath had offered this 8th grade basketball player, Fred Gully. Stan Heath later said that's ridiculous. He was at some kind of booster thing.
Yeah.
He was talking to boosters, and he might have joked that he had offered the kid because somebody had asked him about how good he was. He said, I was just joking. We have not offered him.
Yeah.
And, you know, I don't think Fred Gully ever ended up in Arkansas. So I don't think it's happened in any sport, but it certainly, according to Otis, hasn't happened in football before. Is it a trend? I don't know. There's a lot of things that are changing these days.
Yeah.
Mostly the trend, though, is all of these grad transfers. That's where you see the difference. So I don't know if they're going to start offering younger guys, but we'll see, I guess.
I feel like with guys like that, you just want to be one of the first ones.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's really unusual. I don't know of anybody like that in the 8th grade.
I mean, can you imagine? He must stick out like a sore thumb.
I've seen some kids that were overweight, like you might have a kid 6'5", 300 because he's just overweight.
Yeah.
This is like what you would want in a defensive end in high school.
Exactly.
Not junior high.
Right.
So 6'5", 240 sounds pretty cut to me.
Blood Red Hog has our next one and asks, why is our O-line coach leaving for LSU, and why now with the recruiting dead period over?
Well, I don't think it has anything to do with the dead period and the fact that athletes are now coming in and being able to be on campus. I think he got offered now and left because Ed Ogeron fired his offensive line coach right after spring football, and it's taken him this long to figure out who he wanted, and he offered Brad Davis. Now, I don't think this was a shock to Sam Pitman because he brought in a tight ends coach who had worked under him at Georgia in the O-line.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of people that were saying at the time when this guy was hired as tight ends coach that he was really being brought in to eventually be the offensive line coach, and it's now going to happen.
Cody Kennedy.
A lot sooner than they thought. But this is why that was done. So I don't think this was a surprise. But why did he leave? He left because he's from Baton Rouge. His parents are there. He's got brothers and sisters there. And I think we've got some graphics here because he issued a statement when he left. I'm going to read this if you can pop these up. I'm disappointed to not finish the journey we began, but I'm excited to return home to my native city and enjoy my parents and siblings. Arkansas is in great hands under Coach Pittman's watch. He has instilled toughness, desire, and pride in being a Hog. I am sorry for those who I've let down, but I hope those who truly know me will be happy for my opportunity to return home. I'm excited to begin this new journey. Go Tigers. Well, he's nice and all that.
Yeah.
No, go Tigers.
No, I don't think anyone here will be saying that anytime soon.
We hope he realizes someday he should have stayed where he was.
But of course, wish him the best of luck as well.
Right.
All right, Metropolis Hog wants to know, who do you think will or should fill the tight end coach spot with Cody Kennedy moving over to the O-line?
Yeah, that's a big mystery. We've asked around. There's nobody seems to be named yet. There's no front runner or whatever. We even talked to one of the players after the game last night and asked him that question. He said, we haven't heard. We haven't heard anything. The only thing I've heard is some people on these message boards are saying, well, Chris Gregg, he was a tight end, a good tight end under Bobby Petrino. I think he was briefly in the NFL. The problem with him is I don't know of any previous coaching experience
and
he
you
has.
can't just bring him
So
in.
I seriously doubt that will happen.
Yeah.
I think Sam Pittman's looking around and he'll hire somebody, but right now there's no names popping up on our radar screen.
So still,
whatever.
your guess is as good as ours at this
Yep.
point.
Yep.
Oklahog says, discuss your thoughts on staff turnover. Too much, too soon. Trust in Pitman. And is it a concern that our coaching staff has grown very young compared to the staff first brought in to the U of A by Pitman?
I don't think there's a concern. Now, if you look at the total turnover, what is this now? 1, 2, 3. Is this 5 of the original 10, I think, have turned over after the first year?
But
That's a lot, but 2 of these, Justin Stepp, the wide receivers coach, was the first that left.
right.
He was a holdover from Chad Morris's staff, but he had a chance to go back to South Carolina where he grew up.
Right.
So that's not a surprise.
Yeah.
Well, now this is the same thing that
Brad
we've
Davis, yeah.
discussed. He's going back home. So those 2, it's just coincidence
Yeah.
that happened. They would still be here if that hadn't happened. The other 3 coaches, the story we've gotten, and we've discussed this before here, is that after the first year, Sam Pittman evaluated the recruiting and he wanted better
recruiting.
He's dead serious about recruiting.
Yeah.
A lot of coaches that I've been associated with in the past, a lot of them here at Arkansas, they'll have 1 or 2 bird dog type recruiters.
Yeah.
And there'll always be a guy, sometimes a defensive coordinator, that doesn't really like to recruit, and so he doesn't really have to.
Yeah.
There's none of that with Sam Pittman.
No.
Everybody has to share the load. And I think it's working because right now Arkansas is just out of the top 10 in recruiting. That could change, but they're having a really good recruiting year, one of the best ever on record.
Yeah.
And so 2 things I would think are happening. Number one, he's going with younger coaches.
Right.
What we're told about that is younger coaches are better recruiters. They're more aggressive, they're more willing to go on the road, and they can relate better to some of these athletes. So he's placing a heavy emphasis on recruiting, but I also think he's being pretty careful about people that can coach X's and O's.
Yeah, of course.
We'll see if this pays off, but that's why you've had this turnover. 2 of the coaches went back home, and 3 of them, they just went with other people that
Yeah.
could recruit.
And so it's not a bad thing.
Yep.
It's the main thing. So Texas Grocery Hog, interesting name right there, asks, can you give us any background on the reasons why Sam Pittman left Arkansas as O-line coach? Ooh, this could be an interesting one. A few years ago for Georgia. I'm glad Pittman is here as head coach now, but what was the fallout with him and Brett Bielema? Mike?
First of all, I love that name. It's a Hogville username.
I know, Texas Grocery
Whoever
Hog.
this is, male or female, has got to be involved in the grocery business
Right,
in
you would
Texas
think.
somewhere. So
Is this
maybe
an
there's an
H-E-B
Easy Mart or maybe there's a big grocery
Yeah.
store in Texas where this fan is. But it's also his first ever post on Hogville.
Oh.
So when you do that and your first post is a question, I think he's one of those people. We've been encouraging this.
Yeah.
If you want to get your question in, you need to go to Hogville,
Yep,
get a
post it.
username, sign up, and then go to the Ask Mike forum, and then you post your question, and we will answer it.
Yep.
So he's done that, so I'm more than happy to answer this question. It is a little bit involved.
Yeah.
So what was the deal? Why
So
did Sam Pittman
sit back
leave?
and relax.
Well, Sam Pittman loves it here.
Yeah,
He grew up across the line in eastern Oklahoma. He wanted to be a Hog.
of course, yeah.
He came up to the Razorback basketball camp when Lou Holtz was here and got caught leaving the dorm, and Holtz kicked him out and would never recruit him again. And he said that was a tragedy in his
Yeah.
life. He didn't get to be a Razorback. He made up for it, however, when he came back as the offensive line coach. And this is where this sort of relationship with Pittman started. Now, I've been told that initially they were really good friends.
Yeah.
He, Jim Chaney, and Sam Pittman were all backyard barbecue guys. They like to go over to each other's house and try to out barbecue. Look at what I got. Well, look at what I got. And they sit out there and talk and drink beer and
Yeah.
barbecue. And
can see that.
they were all, you could tell they'd eaten a lot of barbecue because all of them were a little bit overweight.
Yeah.
So they loved it. And the wives stay in the house in the air conditioning, and
Yeah.
you know the
Everyone's
coaches
just
are out
hanging
there.
out.
Coaches are out there barbecuing. Okay, but apparently somewhere along the line, things started to change a little bit. For one thing, Bielema was always rumored to go to a certain club on Dixon Street,
Yep.
and so he didn't want to get a DUI, so he would call up these coaches to come get him when it was time to go home, and I think some of them didn't like it.
Probably.
Their attitude was, hey, you're spending too much time down there, you need to spend more time coaching. But where the problem started to develop was that second year. They had a rough first year. They lost their quarterback to a shoulder separation, Brandon Allen. Then he came back and played like 6 or 7 games with a separated shoulder. They didn't win a single SEC game that year. It was a rough year.
Yeah.
Pittman totally rebuilds the offensive line by the second year. They're better. And they went out to Lubbock, and they played the Red Raiders in Lubbock, and it was a close game. Arkansas was trying to get some breathing room before halftime, and Jim Chaney, the offensive coordinator, called this double reverse. And on the second pitch, there was a bad lateral, there was a fumble. Arkansas jumped on it, but they didn't score, and so apparently Pittman was mad about that. Or not Pittman, Bielema was mad about it. So they come out in the second half and they decide to play bully ball. What they do is they take the opening kickoff, they drive 80 yards, they burn up 8 minutes of clock time, they score. Now they've got some breathing room. They kick off to Texas Tech. Texas Tech goes 3 and out. They do the same thing again. Now it's the fourth quarter, and they've had 2 possessions, and Texas Tech had the ball once. Texas Tech ended up with the ball 3 times, 3 and out every possession, and Arkansas blew their doors off. Now, to Pittman's way of thinking, hey, this is great. We did what we wanted to do in the second half. We won a big road game. It's great. But what happened was Bielema went into the post-game press conference and started going off on Chaney for calling that play. Pittman's attitude was, wait a minute, as a head coach, if you have an issue with your offensive coordinator, call him into your office. Don't even dress him down in front of the other coaches. Just get it straightened out in the office. You certainly don't do it in front of the media. So he didn't like that. Okay, so that team goes to the Texas Bowl, and Bielema has already developed a reputation of being kind of a pop-off guy. He would make these statements. Well, there was an incident where they took a picture of he and Charlie Strong, Texas coach, together, and Bielema's doing the upside-down hook 'em horn, which the Razorback fans loved. But I was told that Pittman thought, why are you doing bulletin board material like that? There's no reason to do it. Can you imagine Sam Pittman did he do anything like that in the year that he's been here? So there's already some issues developing here. So Arkansas wins the game. And everybody loves Sam Pittman. He rubbed Texas' nose in it. He made that statement about and he used a really strange reference, which I'm not going to get into, but he beat Texas. And so what happens next? Suddenly we have this ESPN series, Being Brett Bielema. Bielema's like cool. He's driving around in a car. He's making statements. He's going to places. He's Mr. Cool. And I think Pittman went, wait a minute here. This is a little bit over the top. So they come back the next year, and Chaney now is mad, and he leaves. And Pittman's not happy about it, but he understands why Chaney left, because I guess Brett Bielema was just riding him too much, so he leaves. Well, Bielema says some stuff in a press conference about him leaving, and I think, again, Pittman's attitude was, hey, you're the one that didn't like him. You're the one that would always crit. Why are you mad that he's leaving? Now a whole year goes by. They have a great season. They go 5-3 in the SEC. They've gone up to 8 wins. Everything is on track. Season's over. Bielema's still talking about Bielema's still talking about Jim Chaney leaving and how he shouldn't have done it and all this stuff. And at that point, Pittman just went, I'm out of here. This is not the way a head coach behaves. He's gotten a little full of himself with this being Brett Bielema. He's doing all this stuff. This is uncool. So he left. And he said that at the time, now he's not saying all this. I'm getting this from people that know what happened. But basically, his wife is really mad at him. She's from the area, and they both like it here. And she was like, look, you got to be able to put up with this. I mean,
she didn't want to leave.
You've got a boss you don't like, but you need to stay. And he didn't. He left. And it turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to him, because if he hadn't left, he wouldn't have come back as the head coach. So the bottom line is on what happened to them. I think all you have to do is study Sam Pittman as a head coach and what he does. He's got his own way of doing things. He's not a comedian.
Just
He's
the way
not
he
Mr.
carries
Cool.
himself.
But he's pretty cool when he goes on Feinbaum and he's just himself.
Of course, yeah.
He's just country cool.
He's laid back. He just is what he
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people like the fact that he does not pop off. He does
Yeah.
not blame people for things. He
true.
does not take shots at people. This whole thing when they lost Mike Woods,
Yeah.
the rumor behind the scenes was OU came in and tampered.
Yeah.
Okay, nobody can prove that. Nobody knows for sure what happened except maybe Mike Woods. But when Pitman was asked about that and he had a chance to say something
Yeah.
critical, what did he say? It's up to me as a head coach to make sure
Right.
players don't leave the program. We have to make our program in such a way that
they don't want
athletes
to.
don't want to leave
Yeah.
and transfer. They want to stay here. So he's doing this the way he believes it should be done. You don't give bulletin board material to the other team.
Yeah.
You don't say negative things. You don't pop off about your own coaches.
Yep.
You don't drive around in a car on TV looking cool. If you're doing your job, it will work. And here's another example. When we first started doing these Zooms, when COVID first
Yeah.
hit, and we hadn't been around him but maybe one or two times since he
Yeah.
took the job, and I said on a Zoom, Coach, when you were here before as an assistant coach, what we used to like about you was you would come in after practice for these interviews in the media room at the football center.
Yeah.
And you'd always take your shoes off and your socks off
Right.
and you'd prop because it was hot out there.
Yeah.
And I said, we don't quite know how to react to this Sam Pitman that's all formal
yeah,
and
just-
stands up here at a podium, and now you're on this Zoom. And I said, when are we going to get to see that other Sam Pitman, the guy
Yeah.
that takes his shoes off? And here's what he said. He said, I haven't proven anything yet. If we start winning games and I'm satisfied that I'm doing my job, then I will take
Then
my
take
shoes
your-
off. But
yeah.
we have to wait until I do that.
Yeah.
So he hasn't won enough yet that he's. But if
He
you
feels
ever see him take his shoes off, and I'm hoping we'll have press conferences in the future.
yeah.
These Zooms.
Be
will
nice to
stop.
see them like in person.
Yes. So if it ever happens again, I promise you, if I'm there, I'll take a shot of him with his shoes off, and we'll know that he's met his own standard.
I love that. All right. I think we've got one more question for you, Mike. Last one. Pat Boat says, I'm a firm believer that it's rare to win a championship with a score-first point guard. He should be the leader and set up the offense. I want to know, who is University of Arkansas's greatest point guard?
Almost nobody agrees with me. on this.
We've talked about this the other day a little
Almost
bit.
nobody agrees with me on this. Almost everybody associated with U of A basketball, and I'm talking coaches and people that have known these guys, will tell you Lee Mayberry. And
Yeah.
Lee Mayberry was a great point guard. But I have to go with Corey Beck. And the reason I'm going with Corey Beck is because he played on two Final Four teams,
Yeah.
not only two Final Four teams, but two teams that went to the championship game.
Okay.
He was on a national championship team. And Lee Mayberry's teams never got to the Final Four.
Okay.
Now, maybe that's not Mayberry's fault. I had somebody tell me, well, if Mayberry had been on there, had Corliss Williamson, they'd have won 3 national championships or whatever. All I can go, to me, the goal is to win.
Yeah.
As high a level as you can. And Corey Beck was the point guard on the national championship team, and he had a lot to do in what happened in both of those years as they were trying to get to the Final Four. There were games in which he took those games over,
Yeah.
defensively and offensively. I remember a game up in Kansas City. They were terrible in the first half, and he just came out and owned the other team in the second half. So I've always been a Corey Beck fan.
I like it.
Lee Mayberry, but I'm a Corey Beck fan, even though a lot of people, including Coach V,
Yeah,
told me
I was wondering
wrong.
if you were going to mention
He
it.
told me I was crazy. That's all right.
That's okay. If you're watching this on YouTube, just leave a comment below. It'd be fun to see who everyone thinks is the best. So maybe someone will agree with you. I'm sure that some
maybe
people
there's some
will.
rare person out there that will agree with me.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week's edition of Ask Mike. Everyone, thank you so much for watching.